Hello, everyone. Welcome to Redesign Your Life Today, the podcast that brings you real story of people who have experienced profound transformation, individuals who have redesigned their lives from the inside out and are here to prove that change is possible at any stage of life. I'm your host, Daniel Kobryner, mental fitness coach. And my mission is to help you align your mind, your heart, and your purpose to create a life of clarity, freedom, and unstoppable growth. Today, I'm very happy because we have a very special guest. It's George Haymaker, because George embodies that mission in a very powerful way. After building a successful business, George found himself facing burnt out and addiction. But instead of staying stuck, he turned to neuroscience, rewiring the patterns that caused exhaustion, rebuilding his focus and energy, and rediscovering a calm, sustainable way of performing at his best. Today, George is a brain performance coach who helps high achievers with retrain the brain and regulate this nervous system so that they can operate beyond stress, distraction, and burnout. In this episode, we are going to explore the science of transformation, how to move from survival to flow, from reactivity to clarity, and from burnout to brilliance. So, George, a very warm welcome to the show. Really delighted to have you there. And first, I'd like you to complete my introduction, if it's all right with you.
Boy, I don't know how to add to that. That was very nice of you to, what a great introduction. So it's great to be here and see you again. And hello to all your guests.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And it's in the introduction, perhaps I can start with one area because you said in your message, retrain your brain, reclaim your edge. And this is so powerful. So I'd like to know tell us about your personal experience. We'll start with this. Where did you come from and what brings you to what you do now about your story?
Yeah, I'll try to be as succinct as I can. So I'm 65 years old now, um, and I was an entrepreneur for most of it. I operated, started, built, led small to medium sized companies in different industries, but mostly around offering a service or producing a product.
Mhm.
So everything from I developed an ice cream brand to I operated a metals manufacturing company and a lot of things in between. And so I lived a very, stressful life, the life of an entrepreneur, right? Working 24/7, 7 days a week. And, I just didn't handle it very well. And so I began to cope with, in ways, behaviors and substances to ease the anxiety and stress I was feeling. Um, and that didn't go to a very good place. And eventually, at the age of 52, I ended up in rehab for alcoholism. Um, and it was actually, I look at that experience as being one of the best experiences I've ever had. Because while it was extremely painful at the time, I was living my life in a way that was not sustainable. I wasn't happy or fulfilled. I didn't even know the purpose of life, like what it was that I was trying to get out of it. Had never stopped to think about anything like that. I didn't know anything about my brain. I just assumed that my brain was there to serve me and give me whatever I wanted, whatever I needed, whenever I needed it. I didn't realize that the brain needed things in return in order for it to give me what I needed. And so this stopped me in my tracks, this experience that I had with addiction, and caused me to reevaluate everything. And so it started with me starting to learn about my brain because you know, my obstinance around not knowing anything about it had got me into that position. So I realized that, I need to start looking at things differently. And so I started by, getting into AA and Alcoholics Anonymous program, but then I really started doing my own research and education around my brain, how it worked, um, psychology, addiction psychology, spirituality, and then eventually neuroscience. And my life changed so dramatically over that period of time that, you know, I just, I was just so happier and so much more aligned with who I always wanted to be that I just knew that this is something I wanted to start doing as a second career. And so that's what led me to where I am now. I went back to graduate school and studied neuroscience and got into coaching and got certified to do that. And now I want to help people that were like me who are operating in their professional lives, not understanding how their brains work, having these mental experiences that aren't helpful to them, and helping them understand that, you know, they're not broken. These are all just patterns in their brain that they're experiencing, and that they've developed these patterns to begin with, and now they can develop new ones to transform into. So, so yeah, that's kind of a long-winded way of saying how I got here, and I'm just happy to be doing what I'm doing.
Wow, this is amazing. And George, do, would you remember like one moment when it shifted in yourself where you say, I've got to do something different?
Well, I was pretty bad off when I hit my bottom.
Hmm.
I was doing a lot of pain pills and drinking a lot of alcohol, so I was in a bad physical and mental place. It was really bad. And so I was one of those, and I'm sure that you've seen others in your travels where, and I think a lot of us just don't want to change until we have to change.
Hmm.
We don't even know that really change is possible. We kind of think our brains are fixed and that we have what we have and there's nothing we can do about it, or we just don't know how to go about it. And there seems to be this knowledge void around the brain and how it works. Um, Even though it's the thing that's most influential in our lives, determines our success, our level of happiness and fulfillment, we know nothing about it. We know a lot about other things, like how to run our businesses and do what we do, but we just don't know anything about the brain. And I was one of those. And so, it was easy for me when I got to that point because I had to change. There was no choice. I tried every which way I could to still maintain that lifestyle, but the gig was up and I just couldn't go any further. It had been 30 years of that kind of activity, and I had to change. And it was starting to cause consequences in my life. My relationship with my wife was getting bad. I had had 3 DUIs. I had to leave my business with my partner because I just couldn't function anymore. So it was a situation for me where I absolutely had to do something. But not everybody's like that, and they're experiencing difficulties, but maybe their consequences aren't as dramatic yet. And so that's the hard thing is, you know, I'm doing okay, not realizing I could be doing better, but I don't even know how to change, so I just kind of keep going the way I am,
Hmm.
because I don't even know the first step to take. And that's where people get stuck in this middle ground of not knowing how to change, whether to change, what would be involved in all of that.
Yeah, and this is and actually for people watching this and experiencing, I mean, similar issues, what would you say are the first signs which you really have to look at when you think, this is not going well, I've got to do something?
Yeah, I think it's all in the forms of mental friction, where you're experiencing you know, conditions or states or mental outcomes that aren't pleasant.
Hmm.
It could be anger, irritability. It could be, fatigue, low energy, loss of focus, um, easily distracted, um, any number of things that just aren't pleasant. Like you're just not in alignment with and free and in flow and you just um, you're just experiencing these outcomes during the day that just aren't pleasant to deal with. And so
Okay.
I think that they're patterns. I mean, you're having unhelpful consequences in your life. There's just things that aren't right, and you know it, and you're experiencing that, and they're unpleasant and unhelpful, and you just um, to me, those are the first signs, or you're coping in ways that aren't healthy. Like in my case, it was alcohol and then pain pills, but maybe you have an unhealthy relationship with stress, and you're using these behaviors or addictive substances to cope with that. And you know that what you're doing is causing problems in your life. Maybe it's financial troubles or relationship troubles or health problems. And you just, you know that it's not, you don't feel good. You don't feel good about it. And you just, you know that something should change.
Right. So thank you so much. So for everybody listening here, feeling fatigue, exhaustion, burnout, I mean, really negative emotions. This is a sign that it's really time to do something. Yeah.
Yeah, especially when you're in the patterns and they repeat frequently.
Yes. Yeah.
And those are all patterns that we train our brains to be in. And we can go into that in more detail if you want. But when they keep resurfacing over and over again,
Hmm.
you just seem to be locked in these patterns, um, and you don't know why they keep reoccurring. Um, what happens is you've trained your brain to be in these patterns, and your brain is a prediction machine, meaning your brain will predict based on what it's experienced before.
Hmm.
So when you're operating your life and your brain is taking in this information from the world around you and from your body, and it sees signals that represent things that have happened in the past, what happens is your brain is operating milliseconds before you're even aware of it, and it's pulling past experiences from your memory that represent what you're experiencing right now. And so if there's triggers out there that um, have historically set you off and set you into these patterns, your brain recognizes those and then reaches into your memory and says, well, this is how you've thought, felt, and behaved in the past when we've experienced these things that we're experiencing now. And so this is how we should do it again because it's what you've trained it to do. It's what it knows. And so it predicts that into your consciousness. And that's why these patterns keep coming round and round and round again, is because they're very much like, going into the gym and training your muscles over and over again. You've trained your brain to have these emotional, cognitive, and behavioral patterns. And so no wonder that they keep recurring is because that's just the way that the brain operates. And so that's what people like you and me do is we help people train their brains to experience new patterns that are more helpful to put in place of the ones that aren't, and begin to practice those in alignment with the new identity that we create for the person that they want for themselves, so that it's all in alignment and tethered together, and then we start heading down that path.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, when we realize that, you know, that there are two parts in the mind. I mean, there's a conscious mind and the subconscious mind, and our conscious thought. Tell me if the figure is correct, but very often people say it represents just 5% of the mind. I mean, 95% is this thought which where we run on autopilot. And as you said, which we acquire. These are the programs which we acquired from birth because of our environment. So it just we learn anything. We don't have any tool when we come on this planet. We have some genetics, but I think it's quite limited, the importance of that. But it's really about the environment, the way our parents, interact with us, friends, and it could be church and school.
Right. Those are all seeds of the pattern, that like you say, we come into the world with some genetic predispositions, some hardwiring, but
Hmm.
then we're exposed to our environments, and that wiring begins to evolve and get shaped and is malleable based on what we're experiencing in our environments.
Hmm.
And remember that what we're all trying to do is satisfy six core psychological needs that we have as human beings. We have the need to be um, autonomous, the need to feel equal, the need to feel stable and protected, the need
Hmm.
to feel significant and valued in the world, that we mean something, the need to feel skillful, and the
Hmm.
need to feel together with people. Those are the six needs. And
Okay.
so when we're in our childhood and we're trying to meet those needs, you know, um, we don't have a lot of cognitive development to understand what's happening to us. And so we'll meet those needs any way we can. And so if we're in a dysfunctional environment as children, sometimes we develop unhealthy patterns as a way to meet our needs in response to the environment that we're in. And the thing about patterns is that they get reinforced through repetition and through emotional activation and salience. And so, obviously, when you're a child and all you're trying to do is feel safe and protected and feel valuable and together with your mom and dad and your siblings and this and that, like you have very basic needs. Um, and if those aren't being met, um, you can get really emotionally activated, right? I mean, that's why children cry a lot, is because they're just not getting their needs met. And so, um, and so these patterns, the more that we repeat them, the more ingrained that they get. And so you're right, as you head into adulthood, you could have repeated these unhelpful patterns over and over and over again for years and years and years. And by the time you're 18 and heading out into your own, these are really well developed. And you just don't realize it. You just thought that that's just the way life is. But now you get into adulthood and they don't serve you well anymore. I mean, they're just conflicting with how the world really operates. You could be a perfectionist or a people pleaser, or you could be defensive or angry like I was, always with low self-esteem, always trying to prove yourself because you didn't feel worthy as a child. I mean, it just goes on and on. But those were all patterns that we developed to meet our needs at the time. Well, me as an adult, it really wasn't helpful when I would get defensive when somebody would point something out to me in a business setting, or angry or defensive or, all of those things. It's just not helpful. And so I just didn't know why I was that way. I just had trained my brain to be that way because that's the function of the childhood experience that I had. Okay. And so then I knew it was unpleasant because I didn't like feeling that way. So I started to cope with alcohol to ease those symptoms. And so it just, that's the thing, is many adults have these patterns that they brought with them from childhood, and they're unhelpful in their lives, and they're causing them mental friction, mental strain, and they just don't know how to tackle them or what to do. And so the good news is, the hope is that the brain learned those patterns once, so it can learn new patterns again. The brain is very adaptable and trainable and malleable, and it's willing to learn always for our entire lives. And we just have to know how to break free from the old patterns and put new ones in their place that are more helpful to us. And that's what, again, people like you and I do, is we explain how the brain works, how it got to be where it got to be, and how it can move and shift into something different.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for, outlining this. And see, I heard that in the first 7 years of our lives, we take everything in without filter, like a hypnosis mode. So it's why this is for us, there's only one truth. This is the truth. This is life. And it's why by default we are going, as I said, to repeat it because we don't know better. And of course, what's important as well is the emotions we have encountered. If somebody tells you off, you are 4 years old and you're a little too loud and you say, oh, stop this, and you can't be so loud. Oh, there's a big shock. We take it in. Our body is shaken, but afterwards, every time, we'll change our behavior subconsciously because we don't want to feel this again. And so it's really about, yeah, understanding that even, what you mentioned, George, like, for instance, taking alcohol, it's the idea is that we are so uncomfortable, we cannot live with this. So, in a way, it's a way to numb ourselves. It could be alcohol, it could be drugs, it could be sex, it could be gambling, but it's something which really will take our mind away from our everyday life.
Yeah, I mean, really, what that discomfort represents is an activated nervous system that's typically in chronic stress. Um, and what you do then is it's like revving a car in your driveway that's in park, and you just keep revving the engine. And
Mhm.
so what happens is that it becomes a brain resource problem where um, the brain only has so many resources at its disposal every day. And when I say resources, I'm talking about energy in terms of ATP, which is made from glucose and oxygen. I'm
Mhm.
talking about neurotransmitters uh, like dopamine and serotonin and oxytocin, GABA, glutamate. Those are made from amino acids from protein, um, minerals, um, like sodium chloride, potassium, magnesium that come from either food or electrolytes. Those help our neurons open and close so that our thoughts and emotions can process in sync and on a timely basis. So, and then there's attention bandwidth. In other words, we only have so much attention we can apply to things during a day, and then it fatigues, and then it has to reset overnight. So, um, a big part of what I do as a brain performance coach is to help people understand that equation.
Mhm.
And when you're in chronic stress mode, um, because your nervous system's activated because you're always anxious or uncomfortable, experiencing mental friction, you are burning through these resources at a rapid rate. Again, it's like
Mhm.
sitting in your driveway revving the engine. And so um, you can run out of resources if you don't know how to replenish them um, in the middle of the day. And then, your brain then says, uh-oh, I'm out of resources. I need resources somehow to cope with this because I've got more work to do. And so then it goes on threat mode and starts pulling resources from other parts of the brain, including the thinking part of the brain. And so that's why when you get highly activated and stressed out and low on resources, you can't think anymore because the brain is pulling resources from that part of the brain into the survival part of the brain because that's its number one job is to survive. And so um, when you're experiencing chronic stress, high levels of activation constantly, it is really unpleasant. Okay. Um, and it ends up in overwhelm and burnout and anxiety and these things that are just really uncomfortable. So at that point, what's the brain looking for? It's looking for relief. And so what it wants is dopamine and
Mhm.
endorphins and things that
Mhm.
feel good. Okay, those neurochemicals that feel good. And so you know, there are different ways to get those. Uh, Having sex, eating a good meal, exercise, okay? But those all require you spend energy in order to get them. And
Hmm.
they generally give you a slight raise in dopamine and then a slight fall off, okay? It's a very gradual process. It takes time. The brain realizes it's going to have to expend resources to get them. So if you introduce a artificial dopamine producer, like a drug or an alcohol, or a behavior like gambling or sex or shopping, where you don't have to work very hard, all it requires is reaching in your cabinet to get a bottle. So the brain knows it doesn't have to work hard.
Hmm.
And it gives you a dopamine hit far in excess of anything else that you can offer it as a normal life pleasure. The brain's going to raise their hand for that every single time. You mean I'm already low on resources. I don't have to work hard, and you're going to
Hmm.
give me some relief with a really high hit of pleasure. Thank you very much. That's what I'm looking for. And so that's why these um, addictive behaviors and substances become so, um, the cravings for them get to be so strong, is because there's nothing else like it that the brain has experienced. It can't get it anywhere else. So, that's what happened to me is I kept doing that. My brain kept saying, hey, this is a pattern that I know works. You're always stressed out. You're always on the edge. You're always activated. I know that this solution won't require any effort on our part, and it has a very high return on investment. And so I
Hmm.
kept going there over and over and over again, developing that pattern. And then my brain just kept predicting it. Every time I got stressed, it said, well, we know how to solve this. Let's go get the alcohol. And
Hmm.
so, you know, um, and so absent any ability to check and balance that or desire to, I kept going down that road until I was addicted.
Absolutely, very powerful. So the brain is looking for the quickest and easiest way to get out of this condition. So
Yeah.
and and now, George, so okay, we are in this stage, and yeah, there's the need to to change. And then you were talking before about rewiring, the brains, and now we'll talk about high performers. So imagine people come to your place. So first, okay, I suppose you speak to them and you try to understand where they are at for the moment with their with their brain. Yes, it's like an assessment, I suppose, or is it done with questions? Or how does it work?
Yeah. I need to understand what they're experiencing, what they're, uh, what's causing problems in their life.
Hmm.
And they typically will know that. And it could be two, three, four things. And they could be related or not. Or they, usually they are. They're just, you know, different forms of the same thing and so we identify what those are,
Hmm.
and then the first task is to find out where they came from. So
Okay. Hmm.
these things are patterns because they've been practiced over and over and over again, repeated. Because every time, and when we say wiring, let's just be clear what that means. Wires in the brain are basically strings of neurons that are connected to each other
Hmm.
that represent a part of a pattern. And so if you think about any thought you've ever had, or any experience you've ever had that has a thought component, an emotional component, and a behavioral component, those are all broken up into these strings of neurons, and they're encoded in different parts of the brain depending on the part of the brain that's responsible for that part of the experience.
Hmm.
Okay. And so, and they're stored away. And so then the more times that this surfaces, this same experience, um, those strings of neurons are reactivated. So there's actually electrical and chemical signaling that runs through them every
Hmm.
single time that we repeat them. Okay. And the more times we do it, the stronger they get. Because Every time you signal them, the brain says, well, this is obviously important to this person because they're reactivating it again. So we have to make it stronger so that we know that we can have that pattern there for the future for them. Okay, so the brain doesn't care whether it's helpful or not to you. It just knows that you keep repeating this over and over again. So in its way of thinking, it must be important to you, otherwise you wouldn't keep repeating it. So the brain doesn't pass judgment on whether you're happy or sad, whether the pattern's helpful or not. It just, its only job is to keep predicting what it thinks you should feel, think, and act in every situation based on how you've done it before. That's it. And it's to conserve energy in the process. Okay, so that's what wiring is. It's these strings of neurons. So really what we're looking at when we rewire is we say, okay, these wires that we've created, these patterns, for the ones that aren't helpful, we don't want them anymore. So we'd really like to get rid of those wires, and we'd like to rewire some new patterns that we hope will come into our mind, that we can start thinking, feeling, and acting in place of these old ones that aren't helpful. That's what rewiring is. And so, because you have to actually think, feel, and act before a pattern gets created, that's what we're going to do, is we're going to design some patterns that are more helpful to you in place of the ones that aren't. And, you know, it's a little deeper than that. But so what we do is we go analyze the patterns that aren't helpful, the old ones, figure out where they started in your life. Typically it's in childhood. And then we analyze those and talk about why they're no longer helpful, why they started in the first place, and find some evidence as to, you know, how much they're costing us in our lives today. So what good is happening from this pattern? What bad is happening? And we actually write down a list of all the bad things that are happening. And then they look at these lists side by side and they say, oh my God, I mean, this thing's costing me enormously, emotionally and financially, and like in my relationships, it's like all these bad things are happening and nothing good is happening. And so, and there's other exercises that we run to really highlight the impact of this pattern, because what we're trying to do is loosen the grip that the pattern has on the brain. Because right now the brain wants to predict it over and over again because you've rehearsed it over and over again. And so we're trying to say, hey brain, I understand what you've done because I've trained you to do it, but now we're trying to show you that it's no longer helpful. So we need to open the door to a new possibility. And so that's called loosening the grip of the pattern. And then we design new patterns to put into place, which represent how we'd like life to be in these situations, in alignment with an identity that we want for ourselves, that we design for the future. And once we have this new character built, and with the patterns that represent how this person's going to deal with these situations, instead of the old unhelpful ways, now it's the new helpful ways. And then we start to rehearse that version of the person over and over again until they become patterns themselves.
Wow, so powerful and so clear. Thank you so much, George, for that. And if we talk about, for instance, these new patterns or new habits, can you give us some examples of how how you can go into this calm, into this confident mode where really where we'll get as much as far as possible from this survival mode where we respond versus reacting. What are some examples of what people can do to get
Well, the
into?
first thing is to get your nervous system under control. And
Okay.
so that's you know, because you can't, when you're activated, and remember that the brain, its number one job is to keep you safe and alive. So everything else is secondary. And so, you know, there's a couple of different states of the nervous system. the sympathetic state and the parasympathetic state,
Mhm.
and educating clients around those two states and the nervous system as a whole and how the brain uses them, each of these states, because the brain will trigger these different states to activate. There's things we can do to intervene and cause our states to move from one to the other. But just understanding that these states exist and how to use them for our lives is critical information, because we want to try to be in a calm, regulated state as much as possible. It conserves resources. It's better for our health. It allows all parts of our brain to operate. It allows us to, the thinking and regulation parts of our brain to stay online. So it's critical. And so that's one of the first things we do, is to understand how the nervous system works and how
Mhm.
to move in and out of these states at will, on command, so that we can, control, what state that we're in at any point in time based on what we need.
Okay. This is and you work obviously with entrepreneurs and high performers. What would you say are the most common mental or emotional patterns you see in these leaders, particularly when you see that they kind of sabotage their focus or their performance?
Yeah. Um, so again, it can develop. A lot of these develop in childhood. It's amazing how common that is.
Hmm.
And they bring, again, people bring these patterns with them into adulthood. So that it can be anything from, um, and they're typically vestiges around what they weren't getting when they were children, and what they did to compensate and cope at the time. Um, so it could be neglect, um, and if it were neglect, then they might, um, have an issues around low self-esteem and
Hmm.
not feeling valued. And so they might be always trying to prove themselves to the world, be very intense. Um, it could be that they got in trouble a lot as a child. And so then they are, people pleasing because they just want to stay out of trouble. It could be they only got love when they were excellent at school. And so they always strived, they had to be perfectionists because that's what love was attached to. And so they're just these different forms of mental friction that, again, cause problems for them into adulthood. And they're stressful because they cause friction and they don't know why. They don't know how to get out of them. They battle them. And so these are just resource draining patterns that they've developed. And so they tend to run short of resources, the energy, the neurotransmitters. And so they're typically highly activated and stressed out because they're out of balance resource wise. And that's where they need to be taught around how to balance their mental resource tank, how to fill it as full as possible, how to expand it over time, and how to spend it wisely throughout the day. And so, we're developing lifestyles around, how to eat, how to exercise, how to recover, how to structure your day so that you're doing certain things at certain times of the day. Um, and so it's a whole tutelage around, how to lead a brain first lifestyle, one that considers your brain first and foremost, that gives it everything it needs. So, it isn't stressed and it isn't put under pressure. Um, and then these unhelpful patterns, which are resource draining, we figure out how to resolve those so that, the individual can move forward without, you know, um, draining their resources as rapidly as they have.
Yeah, thank you. This is so powerful. And of course, I'm in a similar field as you are, George, and
Yeah.
it's a lot resonates. And for babies and young children, it's really, I mean, some of the fears. I mean, to feel not good enough. I think a lot of us, if not the majority of people, perhaps experience it at a time or not in our lives. And there's these fears, as you said, of being rejected, fear of abandonment. Uh, yes, and if I use this expression, healing your inner child, how does it resonate with you? I mean, and perhaps, I don't know, in your practices, George.
Yeah. I just look at it from a neuroscientific point of view where
Mhm,
these patterns started in childhood.
mhm,
There many times they carry deep psychological wounds, trauma, high levels of emotion, as you've stated before. And so that's why they're very sticky and prominent in our brains because the brain prioritizes meaning and it defines meaning by what emotionally activates you. And so if you have a pattern that originated from childhood from a wound that was highly emotionally charged, and every time you experience versions of it, it stirs up the same emotions. Your brain has tagged those experiences or those patterns with neurochemicals that tell the brain, wow, this is really meaningful to this person. And so they stand out like with asterisks within the brain.
mhm,
Um, and so, yeah, so when you talk about healing the inner child, it's a matter of getting to the origins of that pattern, reconciling with it,
mhm,
understanding why it happened, trying to get it to a place where you can um, diffuse some of the emotion around it. Because if you can um, diffuse the emotion, that pattern no longer has the same um, hold on you that it has. Um, and that is when it starts to become less sticky and the brain is willing to consider other alternatives for it, okay, for this pattern. And so
mhm.
that's what the work is to um, dissolve some of the emotion around it, make sense of it, try to package that up and get the client willing to put it up on the bookshelf and say, this was a chapter in my life. It no longer works for me. It has so many costs. I don't want it anymore. If this were to happen to a friend of mine, I would advise them to move on from it. There's a lot of exercises you can go through to help do this. But then, um, but you can't just do that. You have to replace it with something else that's more helpful in a way
Yeah.
that's redesigned, so that when these things come up again in the future that have triggered this old pattern in the past, you have a new way to move forward with it. Because it's not enough to just say, okay, well, now I understand why this happened, and I don't think it bothers me as much. You really need to move people to some other place. You have to give them an alternative, because otherwise they're just stuck with what they had, and
Exactly.
there's nothing to replace it with. That is the part that is critical, is moving them, giving them an alternative that's tied to a different identity that they can then lock into for the future.
Yes, yes, yes. So powerful. Yeah, because yeah, we've got to have the yeah, a replacement pattern, and and this brings me to the next question. Obviously, uh, it's about forming new habits, and I guess, George, that you've got a lot of tools in your toolbox, in terms of what's possible. And I'm just going to mention a few words, and I would like your take on that. And
Yep.
you are not going to be surprised. I mean, if, for instance, I talk about meditation, about mindfulness, about breathing, what does it, how does it resonate with you and with the tools you are using?
Yeah, and I've got to run after this question. I've got a 3 o'clock hard stop, Daniel.
Okay.
But so breathing or meditation does a few things. It really helps condition the nervous system. So someone like me that had a very highly activated nervous system, it allows us to calm it and to condition it at a lower level. So you're basically training your nervous system to calm. And again, uh, the brain, the entire nervous system throughout the body, all of it is linked, um, and it can all be trained. Okay, it's not just our thoughts and emotions and actions that can be trained. It's even our nervous system. So we can actually lower the baseline operating level of our nervous system by regular breathing and meditation and just calming ourselves, and set an intention for the day to operate calmly. And once we start to lower it, it takes a lot more for the nervous system to climb and get activated because it's starting at a much lower level. The other thing that meditation can do is it can help you train domains in the brain like attention. So a lot of people struggle with being distracted, meaning their brain is always looking for new and novel ways to get stimulated with dopamine, and they just go crazy because they're trying to focus on their work and they're constantly checking this, checking that. And that's what happens is by virtue of them being distracted all the time, they're training their brain to be distracted. And
Mhm.
so meditation is a great way to train your brain to focus again because you have to lock in on one thing. And sure, when you start, it's hard because your brain has been trained to be distracted. And so you're constantly going to have things coming in the left ear and the right ear saying, look at me, look at me. But the more you work at it and train these neurons in your brain that are in the area of the brain responsible for attention, the stronger that they get. And so it's like anything else. If you were to go into the gym and train your biceps because you wanted bigger biceps and you kept going day after day, week after week, eventually your biceps would get bigger, right? Um,
Exactly.
okay. And so the same thing can happen for your attention network that is responsible for focus. If you sat there in the morning and spent 15 minutes focused on one thing, and then as the
Mhm.
distractions came, you let them come and go and lock back in, you would find that after a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, it kept getting better and better. The distractions would start to slow down and you would be able to keep your focus locked in for longer and longer periods of time. And that is because you were training your brain around um, the idea of locking in your attention. So it's like the brain is very similar to your muscles in your body. They're very trainable, but instead of muscle fibers, we're training neurons. Um, but it acts the same way. If through repetition and lots of it, and through establishing emotional salience to things, which translates into meaning, which says the brain then tags them as really important because you've invested emotion in them, because um, they've produced an emotional response. That way, the brain then sees that and it says, "Well, this is important to this person. I'm going to flag this as really important so that the next time something like this comes up, it's sitting here right up top where I don't have to look very hard to find it." Okay, so that's
Yeah.
where anything that we want to change to be different, we have to then feel the meaning around it. We have to visualize it and experience emotional content around it, because then we know that the brain will see that, identify it as important to us, have meaning, and flag it and build the connections even stronger. Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, thank you so much. You see, I didn't see the time going because it's
Yeah.
so powerful. So, George, thank you so much for your time and all this wisdom. And when our listeners want to contact you, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, please come to see me on my website at georgehaymaker.com. I'm on LinkedIn, George Haymaker, a lot of content there. You can email me, george@georgehaymaker.com. Yeah, or I'm on YouTube. So
And
all those
we'll put
points.
all the details under that. And is there just a last word of wisdom you would like to share, or we've covered a lot today, yeah?
Yeah, I just, I hope people that are feeling that they may want to change, that are experiencing things that aren't pleasant, or have patterns that they'd like to shift out of. The brain's more than capable to do it. Science has proven that. Um, Me, amongst many other people in the world, are examples of it. So you don't have to keep putting up with this stuff. Just see somebody that, like Daniel or myself, that knows how to transition people into different ways of living through science, and you can experience, much better life.
Well, thank you so much. And please, everyone who listen, reach out to George. As you see, it will be mind-blowing. So thank you for all our listeners, for George, for your time, and see you everyone at the next episode.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.